Hi, I'm Michael Kim. I'm the founder of Habit Design, and I'm speaking to you from sunny Seattle, Washington. I'd like to thank Dr. Romero Rivas and the Stanford School of Medicine for the opportunity to be with you today. We have several collaborations actually already underway with Stanford University and are thrilled to now expand that work to the medical community. This session is going to be very exciting. For the first time publicly, we will be sharing some of the best practices for designing successful behavior change systems that result in lasting, sustainable, positive habits. Our research cooperative has tested over 100 such solutions just in the past year. And while many of them failed to live up to expectations, an important few did. We'll discuss what made those successful and how this can provide critical insight for designing your own mobile behavior change system. Before we begin, I'd like to share just a little bit of background on our team. Habit Design is sponsored by Kairos Labs based here in Seattle. Kairos in ancient Greek means the moment that your effort converts to achievement, which is a critical ingredient for successful behavior change systems. Our team previously helped to launch the new genre of augmented reality and serious gaming via the Xbox Kinect.
Oppan Gangnam Style.
We've helped launch the #1 fitness smartphone app, Nike Plus.
Nike Plus uses GPS to track your progress. Let your Facebook friends know that you're going for a run. Each time a Facebook friend likes or comments on your run, your ears ring with applause, helping you take it to the next level.
We've supported health IT strategy and design for the group Health Cooperative, which supports over 700,000 patients and is one of the largest employers in the state of Washington. Finally, we are also unique in that we have licensed PhD clinical research psychologists on staff who have over 20 years of clinical experience designing and testing cognitive behavioral psychology methods and techniques with real-world patients. This synthesis of augmented reality, gameful design, and clinical research is important since the best practices we'll be discussing shortly have been evaluated and tested by clinical research psychologists and have proven effective in the field. Now, to begin, I'd like to share a little story. And it's a story that includes some things you're probably already pretty familiar with, but perhaps might include some surprises. Like most of you, I watched the 2012 Olympic Games with great interest, especially the performance of the most decorated and accomplished athlete in history, Michael Phelps. And I'm sure many of you are already familiar with Michael's swimming performances and athletic prowess. But do many of you know how Michael came to be Michael? Yes, of course, he endured years and years of training and sacrifice. But what may shock you, as it shocked me, as I learned more about him, was how important designing habits was to his sustained success over such a long period of time. And that big victories were the results of small habits. This is from an interview with Bob Bowman, Michael's coach. Phelps started swimming when he was 7 years old, but Bowman knew that habits would play a huge role in turning Michael's talent into a champion. So Bowman developed a series of daily habits that drew on what he calls the science of small wins. There's a series of things we do before every race, he says, that are designed to give Michael a sense of building victory. And if you were to ask Michael, Michael would say nothing's going on in his head before a competition, actually. He's just following the program. But that's not exactly right. What's more accurate is that his habits have taken over. When the race arrives, he's more than halfway already through his plan and has been victorious at every single step. All of the stretches went as he had planned. All the warm-up laps went just as he visualized. His headphones are playing exactly what he expected. The actual race is just another step in a pattern that started earlier that day and has been nothing but victories. And so winning is just a natural extension. Sustainable behavior change is the 800-pound elephant in the room, so to speak. 80% of healthcare costs stem from behavioral issues or our inability to practice and sustain positive well-being behaviors in exercise, nutrition, stress management, prescription adherence, etc., etc. And if we're truly going to bend the healthcare cost curve, finding incremental cost savings here and there won't make a meaningful difference at scale. Researchers tell us that almost 50% of our daily lives are made of habitual activities. What if, as a research community, we could master this force of habit to design positive behaviors and make behavior change simpler and easier and more fun, but importantly, more sustainable at also a massive, massive scale? That is the question that we are going to explore together with habit design. Unfortunately, there is a preponderance of attention among self-improvement gurus and pop psychology on motivation or willpower. Researchers tell us that willpower is an expendable but renewable resource, much like a muscle. And some might interpret that to mean that our lack of keeping off the weight, or eating more vegetables, or behaving the way we'd like to, is simply a matter of exercising our willpower more deliberately, or that we need to try harder to keep our tank of willpower full. Now, willpower certainly has its place, and especially when we are confronted with sporadic or episodic difficult tasks. But isn't this more likely the case? Willpower and motivation is a fickle thing. It comes and goes without warning. It's hard to measure in a day-to-day real-life context. When people say they lack willpower, what they really mean is they're exhausted. That's because motivation is much like a wave. Motivation goes up and it goes down. It's a slippery construct. We have peaks of motivation when we're able temporarily to do difficult things. But as the laws of physics and entropy tell us, our natural typical state is not at the crest of this wave, but in the trough when we can't do hard things, especially when it comes to our health. Many health designs assume that we can always boost someone's motivation. Most people, though, aren't excited about doing health behaviors. Instead, we found that successful solutions that create sustainable daily habits beyond 100 days assume that people are at the trough of that wave. And if you'd like to drill down more into this wonderful concept, I suggest that you go check out this link where one of our featured researchers, Dr. BJ Fogg of Stanford, describes his concept of the motivation wave. So many of us are left swinging back and forth between motivation, which can be temporarily, episodically, and sporadically exciting, having those momentary bursts of improvement, and this other state, the state of being at the bottom of the wave, the state of routine, of how we've been trained or how we train ourselves and how our environment has trained us to be. And it is this state where we focus our attention. This is the state of habits, of conditioning, and of training. A great example of this is our soldiers in the military. You might think that success in battle must require an enormous burst of willpower. Willpower to overcome that fear of death. And yes, of course, willpower is an element for success in battle. But if you ask anyone in the military, especially those in harm's way, they'll tell you that far greater is the importance of their training. In the military, they have a saying, you never rise to the occasion, you only sink to your level of training. So habits and learning how to form positive daily habits is the nucleus of sustainable behavior change. A great synopsis of some leading research in this field was recently done by Charles Duhigg. Duhigg is a Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times reporter who, like me, began to be interested in the importance of designing habits. I highly recommend his book, The Power of Habit, which is a great place to start your journey in habit design. In the book, Duhigg summarizes what researchers have identified as the nucleus of how habits are formed called the habit loop. This loop begins with the cue or trigger for the automatic behavior to start. Then the routine, which is the behavior itself. And finally, the reward. And here, the part of your brain called the basal ganglia learns this pattern for the future. And many people from Oprah to Aristotle have focused almost exclusively on the routine part, on the behavior. But what we now know from hundreds of research studies is that it's really the cue and the reward that really shape how a habit works. If you want to create a habit, you need to focus on the cues and the rewards, and then the routine almost automatically follows over time and practice. The cue and the reward with practice become intertwined, and when this happens, you start to form a craving. The brain stops participating in the decision-making process, and the pattern unfolds automatically. We call this the force of habit, and it can be mastered for positive habits just as well as for bad ones. So let's drill into each of these elements in the loop and explore some of what we've learned across tens of thousands of experiments done in the Habit Design Research Cooperative. As it relates to designing successful cues, the first best practice is to make them very concise, or crispy, as Dr. Fogg would say. Crispy means 4 things. First, successful cues must relate to only a single action. Second, there has to be an audio or visual observable marker. It could be the sound of the phone ringing or seeing the refrigerator door open, but it has to be observable. Thoughts or emotions don't make for very successful cues. Third, the best cues are aware of the context you're in. You don't want to trigger a habit to run, say, if you're in the car, for instance. And a bonus is if you can correctly match these 3 conditions with a cue that already happens regularly in the person's daily routine. These are sometimes called anchor cues, and these natural cues are everywhere in your daily routine. Next, it's important to baby step the routine. First, it's critical to start with something that's insanely easy to do, to the point where you could almost do it accidentally. The routine has to be extremely easily conveyed in 5 words or less, and it must occur immediately after the cue. In order for the cue to successfully trigger the routine, these 2 steps must be tied very closely together. Avoid defining the routine in terms of time-based increments or amounts. This might not seem difficult, but it's a real pain to track time. And finally, perhaps the hardest yet also the easiest in many ways part of successful habit design is to focus on the mastery of the practice and not on reaching an absolute quantitative goal or outcome. Instead of focusing on getting 6-pack abs or running for 30 minutes, simply focus on mastering the habit loop for just doing 3 sit-ups at a time, for instance. I can't overemphasize that enough. Some people have a very difficult time starting from a very small step, but this could be one of the most important parts of habit design. Finally, we have the reward. And in many respects, the reward is the most important and challenging part because that's why habits exist after all. Designing the optimal reward for a given habit loop is as much an art as it is a science. But what we do know from the science is that it's important to have fast and immediate delivery of the reward after the routine is done. Waiting too long afterwards for the reward won't solidify the habit loop. Second, the reward should simply confirm that the routine was performed correctly. The more succinctly this confirmation comes, the better. Think, for example, of how simple the Facebook like is as a reward for posting. An extra bonus is if you can make the routine its own reward. And there are several examples of this, such as running, which can release dopamine that makes your brain feel good. An extra bonus also if you can make that self-rewarding routine also social, because the brain releases oxytocin when we feel connected to others, which further solidifies the habit loop in our brain. An extremely successful example of habit design is something called tag teach. To oversimplify, tag teach is basically clicker training for people. And while some of us might initially cringe at the thought of applying animal training on humans, you would be surprised by how quickly and how long habits last that are formed in this way. Let's take a look at a few examples.
Okay, how old are you?
9.
And have you ever high jumped before?
No.
Okay, Jennifer will show you. The tag point is arched back. Just for every 10 minutes, okay?
I can't. Oh, I like landed on a box.
The tag point is throw the arms up. The tag point is arched back. Okay. The tag point is shoulders to mat. The tag point is kicking up with right foot. Just standing there, the tag point is kick with right leg bent. Do it again. Just standing there. Okay.
I keep my legs straight.
Yeah, you did. The tag point is arched back. The tag point is kick with right leg bent. Okay. After you're over, the tag point is kick both legs. See that? The tag point is arched back. Yes! Beautiful. Okay, that's the last one.
I can't do it.
Now, these are just a few best practice examples of successful habit design. If your organization is serious about designing and practicing habit design inside your own company, community, or university, we'd like to invite you to partner with us. Habit Design is the largest open science research platform for sharing best practices in developing sustainable daily habits that last beyond 100 days. Over 500 companies, universities, nonprofits, and healthcare organizations have joined our research cooperative, and over 8,000 people have successfully applied habit design to forming lasting positive daily habits. Our open science platform is available to partners who wish to architect and practice successful habit designs in their community based on the crowdsourced best practices of the entire habit design network of organizations. We're the first program of its kind to work with licensed clinical psychologists on our staff who test and synthesize only the most effective behavioral research for sustainable habit formation. And we combine this clinically tested behavioral psychology research with our unique mobile as a service platform that empowers teams with real-time, context-aware, intelligent training and mobile peer support that is simple, fast, fun, and sustainable. Over 50,000 habit design experiments have been already conducted so far on our open science platform. And I invite you to check out habitdesign.org for some more highlights from our research and to register your interest in bringing habit design to your company or community. You can also find that there's some past talks by some of our featured habit design researchers, including Charles Duhigg, the author of Power of Habit, Dr. BJ Fogg from Stanford, Dr. Kelly McGonigal, and many others. That concludes this brief introduction to habit design. I hope you and your organization will join us. I'd like to thank again the Stanford School of Medicine for the opportunity to be with you here today. We hope to hear from you, so please email us at info@habitdesign.org. And until then, let's master the force of habit together. Thank you.